And joining us in studio is political analyst Professor Sipho Siepe, Sifiso Mahlangu, and also on the line we have MKMVA Chairperson Kebby Maphatsoe. To both of you gentlemen, good evening and thank you so much for joining us. But if truth were to be told, just in the nature of the tripartite alliance, it almost is a partially breeding ground, if you will, for institutionalized factionalism based on just the nature of that relationship. What would your reaction be?
Well, I think the strength of the alliance lies in that very fact that it's broad, it's multi-class, and there are different perspectives. And what it means that when a decision is taken, a number of perspectives have been factored into and considered. But when one grouping begins to become narrow and parochial in terms of its interest, that's when that group becomes factional, where it no longer has an interest in benefiting from the views of other groupings and or interests or classes within the ANC. So that is where the challenge lies. So the multi-class, multi-ethnic, multi-interest it's a strength of the ANC, but it's also its weakness. Because if you don't manage that, then you lead to these factions.
Precisely, because even the dissenting voices that we've seen primarily comes from top leadership, but within the various structures of the tripartite alliance. And we've seen even with the likes of Blades Amanda saying that the enemy within, or that which will erode the ANC even further, is factionalism and corruption. But yet, when it comes to the call from President Zuma to unite, hardly 24 hours later, we now hear of this list that is making the rounds. We've heard David Makhura denying that he's got any involvement. But be that as it may, it's not the first time that we've heard of factions within the ANC, primarily when it comes to elective conferences.
I think that the destruction is that the factions want to push their own agenda. You can never deny factions, and it's not something that one can avoid. The fact that you have SANCO and you have COSATU and you have the SACP provide groups because it is a tripartite alliance, it's a tripartite state. Even our Minister of Higher Education represents a faction. So there will be factions and there will be groups, there will be perhaps ideologies that link into synergy at some point. Somewhere they will converge and somewhere they will diverge. That is a fact of a party like the ANC. But if they become congruent at some point and they represent ideologies that do not minister to the same cause, then they become dangerous. And when you look at this list, and many will claim this list is theirs and many will deny it, but that's factionalism. They need to deny that they are pumping or pushing someone until the race is set, until your horse wins. And some will be very silent funders of their horse. You will not know. And then they will miraculously arise, closer to the finish line because they are pushing their personal agendas.
Yeah, but isn't that paying lip service to a unity that the president had called for? We heard the likes of Gauteng Chair, Paul Mashatile also encouraging members at branch level, poor communities to stand together in fixing the organization and strengthening it going forward?
Well, I think the responsibility lies not only with leadership, but with everybody. But what is also important is that it's necessary for the leadership, and especially the people whose names are being abused, to say, this is my list, or a list that supports me. To say, this cannot be done in my name. So if I'm Cyril, or I'm Nkosazana Zuma, if you have people who purport to support me and that support comes in violation of the movement's policies, then you should be able to stand up and say, I distance myself to this. But what you also see is that the alliance partners have also become a problem because they themselves have actually pronounced their preferred candidate. So in a sense, you could see others seeing it as a provocation that the person that you are putting, we can also put another person. So this is more very... So right now, I think the organization needs to come out very strong. And I do think that we need to start asking different questions. what are the policies that the ANC must be taking forward and what are the challenges. And then only once there's clarity on that, then begin to say who is best equipped, competent, experienced to be able to take the party forward. But at the moment, what we're doing, we're going back to where the people become sidelines, because when you talk about policy, you're going to talk about how do we deal with the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And you're also going to deal with how do we deal with this challenge of transformation. And then based on people's historical orientation, you ask, can these people be trusted? And that should be the focus. The challenges of this country should be uppermost, and the policies that should guide or as a response to that should be what we all should be talking about. But I do think the leaders who some people think they're doing them a favor should be able to say, not in my name. But when they keep quiet, they also are encouraging that type of behavior.
And so far, we've only heard from David Makhura distancing himself. But as mentioned, MKMVA chairperson, Mr. Kebby Maphatsoe, joins us on the line. Maphatsoe, thanks so much. Good evening to you. Just your reaction to this purported list or the Cyril Ramaphosa slate that has highlighted a couple of names, very interesting indeed, of some who are no longer members or some that had been previous members of parliament and held very cushy positions, but nonetheless, some characters are very unlikely to cut the list in terms of caliber of leadership that the ANC needs right now.
Look, we don't want to get into discussions about who is in the list, who is not in the list, but we really want to respect the instructions by the National Executive Committee of the ANC, led by President Jacob Zuma, that on Sunday issued out instructions that the ANC structures should first consider the document through the eye of the needle and also be able to discuss the challenges faced by the African National Congress presently and what type of a leader will be able to take the African National Congress forward after President Jacob Zuma steps down in December. So as MKMV would want to align ourselves really with the decisions of the NEC. But let's go through the document through the eye of the needle and discuss it amongst our structures of the ANC. We do have a view as MKMVA, but we are waiting for the processes to unfold of the African National Congress.
All right, Maphatsoe, just stay on the line. Bongani is calling us from KwaZulu-Natal. Hi, Bongani. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you also.
What's your comment or question, sir?
I have a comment. It's a very interesting discussion you are having there, and greeting to members.
We're listening to you. Okay, I think we lost Bongani there. We'll just try and get him back on the line. But, I mean, this doesn't bode very well for the image of the ANC at the moment, in that if you have issues of ill discipline within the party, the infighting, a message is sent out to say this is how we're going to conduct ourselves going forward. Even when it comes to the contestation of who's the next administration going to be, it is unbecoming of what ANC members should be doing.
Yeah, I think one must understand that this is a very big organization. You know, when you're dealing with a small organization, it's very easy to force everybody into line. But the bigger you are, you have the challenge of having to control all these people. It's almost like heading a group of cats. They are always ungovernable. So there will always be that element. But what is most important is when the core and the majority begins to behave in a particular way. That sense, that should be that which matters. The fact that you may have one or two outliers, you'll always have them. If you are a party that wants to have 1 million people, and those people are diverse, you should expect that. But what is important is that for the leaders to be consistent. This is not a very difficult thing for the ANC. The ANC has managed to deal with far bigger problems. And what needs to be done now, the ANC needs to re-engineer itself. Right now, if you look at the stalwarts, there's this romance about the past, and what we need to do is to say, how do we deal with conditions of today? Because conditions and our operations are very different, where people could be selfless. Right now, getting into political office comes with certain benefits. You cannot compare those conditions with conditions today. So the ANC needs to jack up its own thinking about theorizing the conditions of democracy and theorizing around the conditions where there are resources. But what we often do is that we don't take that challenge, because we resort back to conditions that have passed and that are no longer real today. But I do think that if the leadership continuously behaves in a manner that is consistent with their pronouncements, then the other people will follow.
Okay, we'll take a reaction from Rema Patsweb. Lehlonolo, thanks for calling us. You in Mpumalanga. Good evening, and what's your question or comment?
Hi, how are you, ma'am?
I'm good, thank you.
Good evening to the two gentlemen there. I think personally that the highest main man, the number one of South Africa, I mean, Mr. President Zuma, I think it's about time he put emphasis on calmness. I mean, we can't go on like this. Each and every time when we are going towards a conference, there are always things like this. He himself, remember when he started campaigning, it was earlier, I think, earlier than this. I think that's all, man. Thanks.
All right, thanks so much, Lehlonolo, saying that horse has bolted in terms of when the succession debate should be happening. Muzi in KwaZulu-Natal, hello to you. And what's your comment or question?
Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Yes, I'm okay. My comment is that I'm a bit worried about this, because right now we don't even know who created this list and what is the intention. That is a bit worried, because now it is called that this is a Ramaphosa slate, whereas we don't even know whether Ramaphosa has been involved on it. So now it is him who has all these names of people who are there on that list. So this is a bit worrying, especially on this time, because even our president has said on the 8th statement, January, that all the ANC members should wait up until this debate has been opened within the ANC structures. So now this is a bit worried on the ANC, and we don't even know whether a person who is doing this is an ANC member or is a person who will continue, who want to see the faction continue on the ANC. So this is a bit worrying.
All right, Muzi, thanks so much. I mean, the damage obviously is done, and there are various scenarios that we can play out, or in terms of where this list originates from, what the intentions is. But what is glaring is that it is very much tilted towards the anti-Zuma camp, in that his worst critics have made it to cut the notch to be in this list.
Well, to me, it's not consequential on who wrote the list, because it's not one person. And the writer and the advocate behind the list will not stand up and say, well, I wrote it and that's the way I want it and that's how things are. I don't think that's the issue. The issue, to me, are the notable omissions and those that resurrect and resurface to make this list. Gwede Mantashe doesn't appear. Ms. Baleka Mbete doesn't appear. Jesu Duarte doesn't appear. Those are people considered to be in the Zuma camp. Old people such as Cheryl Carolus make an appearance. Matthew Posa makes an appearance. This is a tilt to say we are against the Zuma camp. And this is resurfacing leaders who spoke against President Zuma. Matthew Posa was a very audible voice against the Zuma administration. Cheryl Carolus represents the Save South Africa movement. So this is a very strong gun against representatives who are called Zuma people, a Zuma camp. And as soon as you do that, Cindy, you have created a paradigm to say there is a shift and there are groups. When I saw this list, what grew in my mind was to say, where are the likes of Mr. Jeff Radebe, who's, an astounded and respected minister? He has not made that list. And of course, Nkosazana Zuma will not make that list, as good and credible as she is, because to this list, she becomes an enemy. So whether South Africa wants to overlook this fact or not, there is a camp that represents Cyril. And this camp is an opposition to people who are considered to be Zuma supporters. Who drew it and how it crept in is immaterial. But if you study the consensus and you look deeply in who this list represent, it represents a camp and an anti-Zuma camp.
All right, we'll get a reaction from Rema Phatswe. David in Potchefstroom, good evening to you, and what's your comment or question?
Good evening, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity.
Welcome.
After we have seen the list, I think we are very convinced that now the Premier League has already won the battle.
How so? I don't have
because actually the list here by the NN7 is actually unpacking the political realities, which even the politically illiterate have seen everything that was actually planned against Zuma.
All right, David, I think we still, I'm not entirely clear whether we have a crystal ball and we can call things as definite, but your points are very well taken. Thanks so much. Nicholas, hello to you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for asking me. If I remember very well, the president of the Nanseka Women's League said they support Nkosazana Zuma to be the president. You never discussed that. Now today you discuss rumors, something that no one came up and say, I said this. But on the TV on Saturday, Nkosazana Zuma came up, say, the president say, we support Nkosazana Zuma. We never discussed it.
All right.
So what do you think exactly is factual too?
Yeah, Nicholas, I think it's the succession debate in general, but point taken, we also reacted to the Women's League and the fact that they're not buckling under pressure to take back or withdraw Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's name. But let's go back to Rema Phatswe. If you just react to some of the comments that were made, in essence, saying that this is exactly how the cookie crumbles or the story plays out. It's something that was fait accompli over the 2016 and, in recent history, that Jacob Zuma would be targeted, and those that are now aligning themselves with the succession or the next administration will do all in their power to ensure that they are taken care of, even for material interests as opposed to ideological interests.
But I think what we needed to understand is that there are discussions that are taking place amongst members of the ANC. And we also had discussions as MKMVA. But after the instruction from the National Executive Committee of the ANC, that let's follow the processes of the ANC, so that at the end of the day, we all go to the conference united. We might disagree, but once we go through the document through the eye of the needle, we might be able to find each other as members of the ANC at the branch level, at the regional level, ultimately at the provincial level. So the discussions of the list that is out now, it's really unfortunate that the president has just spoken on Sunday that he requests all members of the African National Congress to go through the eye of the needle document, not stifle the debate. You cannot stop the debate not taking place. But to say you cannot go out publicly and say now, this is our list. Let's go back and understand the statement of January 8th that we must go through the eye of the needle, get an understanding what type of a leader must the ANC elect in December.
But we even had social development minister saying that, there is the freedom to discuss, as you are saying, the principles of which a particular leader needs to espouse. But these meetings don't necessarily have to happen in a clandestine way. They have now decided to announce on Dr. Dlamini Zuma being the successor. And it's not automatic that the deputy president will become president anyway. So even if there is a Cyril Ramaphosa faction, it's no guarantee that they will enjoy whatever material resources or whatever benefits for gunning for him.
I think South Africans must respect the president. And I think NEC members must respect the president because it is the NEC that sat at St. George's Hotel and drew up the president's speech. This is not the mind of President Zuma. The statement belongs to the collective, that which we call the NEC. There is a succession debate happening in the country. But to counter that, there is an elective conference. That's why every member will sit down and the branches will speak. I don't know why the stalwarts want a consultative conference. If they want to consult the NEC, they can draw up those meetings and meet the NEC. We don't know what agenda they want to push. And that seems to cause more factions and animosity within members. Because he spoke on Sunday, but already they are drawing side to side and representing, individualism, and that is unfair. I think all members must return to the cause of unity, to say, I might have political aspirations, I might want to see my friend and my brother become a member of the NEC or a member of cabinet or even the president, but let me have the decency to wait. There will be a conference and everyone will speak, but don't shoot people down because they seem to, to have better acumen or political acumen than you have. Respect the work of the NEC and respect the work of unity.
Yeah, but I think these are the unintended consequences of what seemed to be a noble gesture, that of wanting to preserve and help the ANC to self-correct, but having almost a forum that runs parallel with what the party structures could have done has now essentially been counterproductive.
Well, the motives of the veterans they're not dressed in glory. First of all, these are the people who said we could not sit idly and watch our party do this. And our position or positions that make sense that veterans should not be sitting idly anyway. That's the first one. The second one is they seem to coalesce around a movement that is driven by the regime change agenda. And even some of their spokespersons or people associated with them. Yes, you have seen at least those who spoke and have distanced themselves to the regime change agenda. But by and large, for as long as they carry the people who also are protagonist of that agenda, it will be very difficult for one to separate them from that agenda. But most importantly, I thought the statement of the president on Sunday of the NEC was to say, let us focus on the challenges of our people. Now we are back to moving away and drifting away from those concerns. We have the fees must fall challenge. We have issues of poverty. We have issues of rating agencies. The question we should be asking is that how do they, using their veteran knowledge, assist this government and this country to say this, we think, based on our wisdom and based on what the president said, is the way to take the ANC forward. Because ultimately the ANC was supposed to be a parliament of the people. But right now, there is more focus around the people who are members of the ANC rather than the liberation of the people of this country. The ANC talks about the radical economic transformation. This is what we should be talking about. So I would think that what should be emerging from the ANC is to say we had hoped that the general statement was a disruption from our inward looking towards being concerned about what is taking place in this country. But they did not even waste time. They are back at it. So I do think that the ANC allows itself to be sidetracked by people who want to feel important or included, or who feel that they have been overlooked or they are marginalized by history, not because they are no longer in control.
Yeah, but very briefly, as we said, what should the party do now beyond just releasing press statements condemning the actions of these so-called, or rather purported list of NEC members?
I think the party in the first place must get rid of those who represent arrogance. The ivory tower, the populism, and the accrued family that we have in this country. The Washingtons of the Americas and the Sisulus and whoever is in South Africa to say, let us resuscitate and regurgitate leadership. If X is not in the leadership, it cannot work. There are fresh people out there, and allow cabinet to do its duty. Respect the NEC and respect the president.